Welcome back to SoulNet, friends. We're back in the pod talking today about a topic actually that I'm grateful for one of our listeners to bringing into our awareness. But before we get into that topic today, I just wanted to check in on the Soul Sisters and see how everybody's doing, if there's anything on your heart before we get into the good stuff.
Thank you, Dayna. I can share that I've noticed the last couple days I have sad and grieving parts on my heart that are up in my system. And the experience of that is common. And I'm learning to soften my interaction with them and welcome them home to a safe place in my system. So I'm learning that as a process. That's what I've noticed the last couple of days for me.
Very nice, Elena.
Oh, it's nice to see you guys. I think what's on my heart right now is just connection. So I'm really happy to be here today and with you again. I always miss you when we're not on the pod. So it feels good to be connected. What's on your heart, babe?
Well, we're going to share a little bit about that today. So I've been working through some threads and I'll give, a bit of a background. So today we're talking a little bit about moving as we cultivate this awareness within ourselves. But there was a big, fairly notable cosmic event that went on with the new moon. We had the spring equinox. We had the new moon. We had Pluto moving signs into Aquarius, which and into a sign it has not been in for a very, very long time. And for a lot of us that, kind of follow the cosmos or feel very connected to the moon cycles, and I am definitely one of those people, it was an opportunity to, close some karmic cycles. And with the closing of karmic cycles, there's often a lot of this old stuff that continues to get washed out and comes up for us. I don't know if you guys remember, but when we were in Whistler, when we reconnected, this is where the birth of the SoulNet actually came. We talked a lot about closing rings in our lives and whether it was related to this time of our life or where we are on our spiritual journey, regardless of age. And these kind of coming to a deeper understanding of some of the reasons behind the lessons of our younger days. And so I don't know if you remember guys talk, we had these kind of visuals that came to mind. I had these almost like the Olympic rings that would kind of close and light up. I think we talked about tying bows and ribbons and these kind of symbolisms that can come forward when we're our aha moments, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I had one of these kind of ring closing moments into something that is very, very old. So if I go into my heart, which is, historically was not an easy thing for me. Getting in touch with my emotions has been a journey. I learned at a very, very young age to stifle these emotions because they weren't really safe to share in my home. And so as a young person growing up, I had an eating disorder. It's something that I worked through, and I had a slight relapse, very, very brief, after my divorce because it was traumatic and I didn't, have the tools that I have now to kind of work through it. And since then I've had, 20 some odd, almost 30 years of a very healthy relationship with movement and with food, partly as, the work that I've done. I think sometimes we end up in careers as part of our healing journey. So we help others often, as that mirroring of helping ourselves. So this conjunction of all this planetary information kind of, coming forward. And then coupled with some of the physical changes that I'm noticing as my menopausal, perimenopausal self, I found myself back into this place of shame and judgment around my physical body changing. So I beautifully, found myself in this cosmic week of everything coming to the surface of all of these old things that were kind of coming out, going back into these places of, shame and guilt. And I fortunately was able to play witness to myself and go, hold up, I know what that emotion is. That's shame. That's guilt. these are not the emotions that serve me anymore, and they're not scary to me anymore. So instead of running from them, I was able to meet them in this moment. And I was really fortunate that I had a session with one of my practitioners she's a shaman, she's acupuncturist, she's just a beautiful soul. And so I came into all this stuff on my heart, prepared to release it. And then in my experience, when we move through some of these emotional pieces, there's the somatic piece that lays within the physical body. And I've learned to get fairly good at identifying these things and releasing them on my own. However, I do find that sometimes we all need help. And so this particular practitioner was able to, as I identified what the emotion was, she was able to take me through and rework some of these feelings in a somatic way and release the physical feelings that I would feel. And often for me, when it comes around these things around self-acceptance or self-worth or self-value, which have been part of my journey and my lessons here, a big part of those journey, especially with autoimmune illnesses. I think that's part of the process as well. And so he was able to help me kind of transform these kind of darker feelings into the recognition that I am whole and complete because of all of this dance between these different emotions, instead of the previous me that would have seen this like these horrible ways I would speak to myself in the little inside voice. So instead of pushing them down, not allowing them to surface, I was actually able to bring them up, allow them to move through not only on, a cognitive and a heart level, but also on that somatic level, thanks to this longtime practitioner that I work with.
Wow.
I wanted to share because I feel like it's a reminder that these things, as Dayna shared with us last time, these things come up and they can be gone for our lives, and we can think that like they don't hold any power over us anymore and we've moved through it and we're done. But the reality is sometimes these come out in these subtle ways. And if we can continue to grow, we can then meet ourselves in a different place than we used to meet ourselves. As again, as Elena said last time, to be the parent we needed, to meet ourselves with love and compassion instead of guilt and shame.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Dayna.
Yeah.
Heartfelt share. Thank you.
Yeah.
And shame is one of the heaviest emotions to process. And so it lives in the body. It doesn't get processed in the head. It gets processed through the viscera, like you said, somatically, through the touch, the senses, through the senses. I hear so many people and clients saying, "Oh, I'm trying to figure out this emotion." And in your experience, it's more like felt sense of the emotion, and having a practitioner there as a guide to assist you through the feeling of, because it's uncomfortable territory. It's actually physically uncomfortable. It's physically painful often. Especially
I think it's why we avoid it, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Or I used to, for sure.
Thank you so much for that share, Dayna. That is, I think, probably resonant for a lot of people right now, especially like if you're going through body changes like perimenopause or menopause or aging or just whatever it might be, just changes in your life. And you can be triggered when you're not feeling strong or you're feeling different.
Yeah.
And so, that can come up in any number of ways, but I just want to also say, I love the guide, like the practitioner, and leaning into asking for help. We actually share that beautiful guided acupuncturist that takes us on these journeys. And like Ilena was saying, and you were speaking of, is that this pain can be physical and your body can actually feel like it's seizing. I've experienced it as well in my own ways. Wow. It is like, if you've ever felt a deep sense of release, when you actually move somatically through shame or pain or anger, and you come out the other side on a table with a guide, whether it's a shaman, it is like maybe the first time I ever actually understood what the release of an emotion can feel like. So thank you for reminding me of that gift that we can get when we are helped, when we are helped through our pain.
To add on to that, Megan, the constriction that you speak of is the organism, the nervous system. The tightening that you spoke of is the organism constricting, because it's like you have a little jellyfish and you poke it and it constricts because it's a threat protection. So when we have shame, which is one of the heaviest of the human nervous system emotions, because shame excludes us from the tribe, and anything that excludes us from the central survival system will have us be in the wilderness and die. So it's like the ultimate primal fear. And so shame's a big one. And so the constriction is a protective response. We shrink to protect ourselves. Emotionally, we shrink. Shame has us shrink. And sometimes we can have that state going on in the background for decades if we have unprocessed shame from our childhood. And then to release that with a body worker, with a healer, sometimes it takes a few body workers, as it has for me over the years, to release that, especially if you've been living in a state of constriction because of childhood trauma or just unprocessed emotional energy. Unprocessed emotional energy will have us live in that state of background constriction. To experience a release is like, is to be able to breathe again. To be able to breathe again is huge. You must have felt that, an aspect of that, Dayna.
It's amazing. And it's, I do like to think that, maybe this is done, because I've hit layers of this, these pieces of shame have been an ongoing cycle. Like I shared this, a lot of this stuff started in childhood, as it does for most of us, but I've gone into layers of it over the years. I think the alopecia journey, which I haven't talked a lot about on the pod yet, but I do have an autoimmune condition. I have had varying levels of, full hair loss to some hair like I have now. And that one actually caused me to go deeper and take a look at, not only my physical lifestyle as far as how I was managing stress, but start to go into those feelings. And that was when I really first started to acknowledge that, like, how nasty my inside voice was, and towards myself, like nobody else. But it was just like, man, I would never say that stuff to anybody else. But to me, it was like this little voice, and it was just me. She was mean.
Well, this is the reason you don't put it to the others is because your empathic part is stronger than your inner critic part. And so this is the difference between like the empathic trait that dominates versus the more narcissistic trait that dominates. We all have the traits, but it's just like, which one did we adapt to in childhood that got our needs kind of met sideways, so to speak? And so if we notice that empathy worked with our caregivers more, then your empathic part might be stronger than your inner critic part, but the inner critic part beats ourselves up instead. To have us belong to the unit.
Yeah, like, to keep ourselves safe.
I so relate to what you said. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so relate. Hang on. I just want to say that narcissists. So the narcissist in us is actually attacking ourselves, as opposed, and then the empath for everybody else on the outside. Like, I feel like that's like maybe my life. Like all the love out there to everybody, because I'm so empathic. And then to myself, I'm like the little, I'm like, the
masochist. Yes.
Taking the scraps that are left over, maybe.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. This is where that saying, we are our own worst critic.
Jellyfish.
Yes.
Like, I really resonated with the jellyfish.
Yes. We're all the jellyfish.
Like, I was like that. Like, I feel like when shame comes in, I feel like I'm a jellyfish that's just been poked. And then I feel like I'm tiny. Like, I'm tiny. And I always picture like my inner child hiding behind a wall of fire. That's kind of how my jellyfish moment, but we'll get into that on a different pod. But I'll share that story. I had that was one of my somatic journeys. But can we just go back to this like empath narcissist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dayna has shared, you've shared quite often, Dayna, that you learned, and so similar to me too, and similar to Megan and all of us, to people please, to kind of make things
Mm-hmm.
work, right, in your family of origin. So we think of the developing child's mind. They learn through experience. Like if they've had 2 or 3 same experiences in a row, our 7-year-old mind or our 12-year-old mind is going to go, okay, that worked to please mom or dad like that in that way. But then in that moment, we didn't speak our need or just simply say, I felt sad with that mom, or I felt confused with that dad, or I help me because I don't understand. We repressed that, right? So then another part develops in our psyche that just tells us in that moment, okay, don't say that because you'll be bad or wrong, or you'll lose love. And so that part develops inside of us and stays quiet, becomes this inner critic that just helps us adapt to the situation. I mean, for me, it was such a shock to realize people pleasing wasn't actually Eilina. It was just a survival adaptation. Like,
Yeah. And it when it
Oh my
feels like
yeah.
gosh.
this soul division, right? Like that, and that's how I would
Yes, thank you.
my now
Yes,
self is exactly that. It was like
yes,
my soul self as a young child would have wanted to communicate what I was feeling, but there
exactly.
wasn't space for that. So I learned to separate and create this alternate persona, if you will, that is how I
Exactly.
adapted through so many of my adult years, childhood and adult years, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
I
such a
mean,
huge moment to realize that. And then
Yeah.
your healing is
Mm-hmm.
like when you were on that table getting worked with,
Yeah.
because your acupuncturist is your partner in healing in that moment and she's feeling your
Yes.
energy.
mhm.
I'm curious if did you release tears? Did you feel this kind of vulnerable energy in you? Did you like extend empathy towards it? What was your experience?
This particular practitioner, I have released more deep, deep old woundings. And I think it is cosmic timing as well, because I do feel like a lot of us, again, are moving through these kind of
Yes.
old things. But she in particular has this, and some of my most guttural experiences, this transformation. And I've had these alchemical journey where I've literally created, gold from metal, like um,
Wow.
and there's often a very like a visceral, like a guttural cry that comes out through the moments
Oh,
before. Like
yes.
it's like these deep emotions come up and unearth, and they come from the soul voice, because the things
Yeah.
that come out when I'm in these journeys with her are, the voice is not what I know as my own, or I would label as my own, or my ego's voice. It's definitely the stuff that comes out is just raw and real. And I have
Yeah.
been in a violent, shaking, sobbing with her. And then I come out the other side. She walks you so beautifully and transforms, some of the hidden meaning of like how we interpreted as a young child wasn't actually what the scenario was. So she beautifully walks you
Right.
through that moment into a different ending, if you will, of what
Mhm.
if we'd been there in that moment, kind of like we walk our inner child now. But she
Yes.
takes us to that, and through this lovely somatic experience, we reprogram what that memory and that experience was into a more
Right.
loving, compassionate rendition.
Understanding. Yeah.
Yes,
Like it's
thank you.
like a reframe. Wow.
Yeah, on a
Wow.
deep, and not a conscious level. It's all
Yeah.
happening in those moments with the combination of the acupuncture needles and her just beautifully holding space.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. I want to just say thank you, Dayna, because um, if you can find a healing partner, like to your point, an acupuncturist, a shaman, a body worker to help you go deep inside, and someone that you can learn to trust and be vulnerable with. I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
sometimes it takes time,
Mm-hmm.
just like any real, healing partner, a therapist, it takes time to develop a trusting relationship with someone that you're going to release with, right? Especially on that level. But I love the alchemy piece because
Me too.
acupuncture has been a big part of my healing journey as well. And when I have pain, emotional pain, we go to the place in my body where it's sitting. And like you, it feels heavy. And sometimes it feels like metallic, like a heavy metal.
Yeah.
And with my guide, we're able to work through a transformation. And it often, we transform the heavier metal, which often is sitting in my abdominal region, chakra.
Yeah.
Where the metal kind of pools, and we often transform it into gold. And it is, to your point, Eilina, I have a connection to water. I feel, deeply connected to the ocean, and my release is tears. And when that transformation happens and there's golden light, it's like a golden river flowing through your body. And then I just end up in tears on the table. And that's the release that we talk about. It is powerful and healing. And I just want to say thanks to all the people who help us get there.
Yes. I did also want to say, Megan, from an Ayurvedic lens, I love that you actually bring up the symbolism of the elements of water, because our Pitta dosha, for anyone who follows Ayurveda, I'll just give a bit of a lens. So we've got 3 different primary doshas, where all these combinations of all of the 5 elements. And the Pitta dosha governs transformation within the body. It sits in the abdominal region, and its elements are fire and water. And it is the element of this. So you talk about the alchemical process of transformation. The Pitta dosha is the direct one that is responsible for that. And that goes for, all of our digestion and the assimilation of nutrients and anything that happens in there, as well as all of our emotions and anything we take in on a conscious and a subconscious level. So you're right in connection with the elemental aspects that lie within ourselves and without.
And I actually think I am Pitta. I think
You're
that is my dosha.
Vata.
I believe you're a Vata Pitta, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can we do that on another pod? Can we do Can we do the dosha, test?
Yes.
Okay, great.
That'd be fun. Yeah, I was going to add on to the somatic piece that you guys shared. Also, that the release through water in one of my modalities that I use with internal family systems, when we're helping to unburden aspects of our inner child, the younger parts in our psyche, we help them unburden and release their burdens with the elements. Water or air or fire or earth, and create a ritual that creates a reframe and a rewiring. Yeah. And then the younger part has a connection to that element and can use it energetically to continue the unburdening, because it's not a one time, right? It's like a continuous. Yeah. And just to share my you guys reminded me of an experience that I had physically with the release when I had a guide assisting me with some really deep felt sense. I don't even have a memory of it. I was really little. I was born with scoliosis, and so the upper part of my spine curves, deviates. It's like to the right side, but yoga's been really helpful for my lifelong journey of mitigating it. But she was able to bring me back in utero to my experience of being trapped emotionally with my mom's unprocessed emotional trauma. And this experience of being trapped has been a lifelong physical experience for me.
Yeah.
There's no kind of cognitive, intellectual understanding of it. It's just being emotionally trapped with my mom's
Mhm.
unprocessed emotional trauma and family ancestral stuff. And so what I needed to do in that moment was move and like punch and bring fight energy up, because what kind of shuts me down the most is the inability to bring fight flight energy up. So I just moved and
Yeah.
punched and like pushed away the trappedness and created freedom and space, and just like kept doing that. And I was like, it felt like breathing life into the younger parts that felt so helpless and could only experience depression with the helplessness. It was like going down and reaching and saving these parts that are like so helpless and overwhelmed by the trappedness of, for lack of a better description, ancestral trauma of unprocessed
Yeah.
emotions. Yeah.
Oh, I
So
so love you bringing that up, Eilena, just because this is like reminder that we have our own stuff, and then we have what's been brought forward from the ancestors that we're often
hmm
left to close a ring or heal one of those wounds.
hmm
And, we've talked
yeah.
a lot about parenting, and I think that's what a lot of us have, that motivation to heal some of those parts have been passed on from generation to generation, and
Yeah.
say like, no, like it stops here, this is done. And we hear that often in like
Yes.
extreme addictions too, like especially alcoholism and
Yes.
those kind of
Yes.
ones that move forward, right, where we're
Totally.
just like, no, this has gone on too many generations and it's time to change
Yeah.
things. And so I think that's how we all grow as a society, is to have help moving through that, because the ancestral pieces are a whole nother layer of taking us into the layers of the body, right? Not just the physical, but the subtle bodies as well, right?
Can I just ask you, Eilena, do you mind sharing who helped guide you? Because going to the
Yes.
womb
Yeah.
is like, I think that's a whole other
Mm-hmm.
Topic for a whole other day. Like when we go there, that is so deep. I mean, when you go back to the womb. And so I'm just curious who guided you there?
Yes, it's a colleague actually who practices similar modality that I do. But actually, just to add to your point there, going back to the womb is actually quite common, and I do it often with my clients as a stage of healing. So we'll
Yeah.
move through different developmental stages of their past, and often we fluctuate. Like we might be working on like a pre-verbal stage, and then it'll morph into like an adolescent stage. And there's a fluidity in that. But I try to stay with whatever stage is presenting something in the moment, and then
Yeah.
give the opportunity to move and process the work in that developmental stage.
Is it talk therapy, or is it like also somatic, like body work?
It's somatic body work, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm being guided through visualization, through intentional visualization, through pausing, through a modality called focusing. So bringing your conscious awareness into the area with energy work, with breath, and then movement. When the movement is being asked for from the body, because the body knows.
Yeah.
The body holds the score, keeps the score, as Bessel
Totally.
says. Yeah.
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 That's right.
What modalities have you found the most impactful for you as a daily maintenance? Let's say our listeners have the ability to, pay for some services and build their support team, because I think it's a really important part of our wellness, is to have a team of people that we can lean on for different things.
Yeah. I use over the years so many different kinds, but I personally have loved for kind of regular maintenance, chiropractic, and acupuncture, and interestingly, reflexology, because I personally just deeply relax and surrender into it. And when I'm having points worked on that are filled with tension, I just meet it and melt like an ice cube. And so it's like this meeting the tension, ooh, and then it's like it's a really cool experience. And then I also use cranial sacral work has been really helpful for me. Yeah. Internal family systems with the younger inner child parts that have needed guidance, that have needed like a functional adult in the room to help them feel safe, to release unprocessed emotional energy. And what else have I used? I think that's about it. There's lots, but those are my faves.
I, like you guys, have tried many things, and we do lots of things on our journey. But my top two for spiritual and healing partnership, acupuncture, and with someone who's a guide who will guide you somatically, and the forest. The forest. So the forest is my therapist.
Yes.
And
100%.
so I just, so when I met a forest therapy guide, her name is Darlene. She lives in Colorado. I'm going to see her in May. I'm very excited. But she inspired me to become a forest therapy guide myself. But truthfully, the forest is the therapist. So
agreed.
Those are my top two right now. Well, forever.
Wow.
Forever.
I can't believe I forgot to say that, Meg, because I so agree. I'm so there with you. Yeah.
Well,
I feel like
it's one of those
regulate.
I know. I don't know if I hope one day we all can see the forest as our therapist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Right?
Amen to that.
Right? Because the forest and nature is available to all of us. And
she's so generous.
She's so generous. Yes. She doesn't ask for anything in return,
I know.
But she's there. So
unconditional love.
Yeah. If we can remember that nature is a form of, is a partner in our healing journey.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful reminder.
Therapist. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Elena. I'll just add my 2 cents in there. So chiropractic and acupuncture have been my go-tos for a number of years. And I have seen some amazing healing, physically as well as emotionally from these things. Even a time, in my earlier autoimmune illness, I was having a lot of very weird things going on. And I would actually acupuncture after needling. I had these wounds on my body, and I would actually see them like retreat and heal after I'd come out of a session. And I've been fortunate to work with a number of like beautiful acupuncturists over the years, like all very, very talented. So it's been something as part of the practice for years, and chiropractic as well. And for me, partly because I'm very active in my work, and the resets on the physical body have been important, but chiropractic also has amazing work on our nervous system. So, we go in there and we can come out as a very different person. And I had my son, he still sees our chiro as well. And she's so talented. And I remember when we'd have transition years, if he'd come from his dad's house, and he'd be like, we just had different ways of kind of, parenting. And so he'd come home and he'd be like really, really high strung, and he'd have this tone of voice that I'd be like, you can't talk in that tone of voice in my house. That might work at your dad's, but it doesn't work here. Anyhow, I had this chiropractor who he still sees, who he'd go in, and she'd just like bring him back into balance. And he'd come home as a totally different child.
Wow.
And I think, as parents, sometimes we don't know what's going on. And so outside intervention, especially as a single parent, sometimes I'm like, that was such relief for me. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The village, the village, the team.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. So chiropractic, huge part of my team, and the massage, the reflexology, all that stuff is really fun. Physio as needed, but really those are, and the forest always, but yeah, those are some pretty powerful ways. And there are, as we know, of course, many other ways that it can be part of the healing process, and many, many things at different times and different places too.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
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 Depending on the
And
stage.
you guys are my village too. SoulNet.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Sharing
Yeah.
and caring and loving each other and walking alongside each other through these
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Common shared experience and validating each other's experience. I think that's what I notice a lot of us miss is the experience of community validating each other's just human experiences. I think this is why we feel so alone, is that we miss that. Like, oh, I'm okay. You're okay with that? Okay, that helps me be okay with that.
Yeah. And permission to do so, right? Like it often offers that, like, if, and hopefully, as we continue to show up as our vulnerable selves and, sharing our stories, it helps to bring our listeners into that same place and being, more comfortable and confident to share some of that stuff too. Thank you for holding space for me, Soul Sisters, and, our shared experiences of, learning how to accept ourselves. And I know that I am not alone in that journey of learning to accept myself wholeheartedly with those, again, those aspects of the light and the joy that I bring, but also those feelings of shame and being courageous enough to kind of keep going in there. And so as a reminder to all of our listeners out there that might be feeling like they, just don't in some way add up and they're in comparison, and stay on the path, keep cultivating awareness where you can, and meeting yourself as well as you can, with kindness, with love, and with compassion. And on that note, I am going to close with actually one of my favorite teachers. Controversial as he might be, his wisdom really resonates with me, and it's by Osho. Accept yourself as you are. And that is the most difficult thing in the world, because it goes against your training, education, your culture. From the very beginning, you have been told how you should be. Nobody has ever told you that you are good as you are.
Beautiful.
Thanks for listening into SoulNet, everybody. If you liked what you heard here today on the podcast, please follow, like, and share. If you have topics you'd like us to cover here on the net, email us at soulnetsisters@gmail.com.